Welcome to the Power Lunch live on LinkedIn. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday around 12 noon if the technology gods permit on LinkedIn's new live platform. The point of the show is to talk to today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, corporate leaders, and talk about their secrets to success, the habits that they have that can help us be better, that we can learn from. And the things that they do in their professional lives that make them successful. So that's the point of the show. The fun part of the show is that it can be interactive. So ask your questions. If we don't get to them online, certainly ask them in the LinkedIn feed or on the Facebook feed or Twitter feed, wherever you're watching this, and ask those questions. And I know my guests and I know Terry will help answer questions if you have them. So make it interactive. If you like the program, give it a like or share so that people in your network can benefit from the program. Like I said before, we're simulcasting today on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as LinkedIn, and that's all possible because of Social Live. Now, my promise to you is to bring you the very best people to learn from. Today is no exception. I've got a great guest today, Terry Lammers. He's the managing partner of Innovative Business Advisors and an expert in mergers and acquisitions and business valuations. Terry's author of a new book, You Don't Know What You Don't Know, Everything You Need to Know to Buy and Sell a Business. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Got a lot of questions for you today. A lot of questions. We'll get to the book in a minute, but I read something. I had a guest a couple months ago, and we were talking about this. And today, my understanding is today is really one of the best times in history to buy a business with all the baby boomers retiring and selling businesses. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, interest rates are still pretty low. The banks are wanting to lend. Despite, I kind of chuckle when you hear people on their TV or wherever say, "Oh, there's going to be a recession in the next, year and a half." And it's like, I don't see it. I mean, there's just a lot of activity right now. And really the biggest thing is with all these baby boomers retiring is to get them where their business is ready to sell. We like a saying around here, we say all the time is, you may be ready to sell, but is your business ready to sell?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Having done that, having gone through that process. So if you're looking to buy a business or sell it, is a broker one of the best ways?
Honestly, I think it's a great way if you've never done it before. I'm working with a client right now. They just went through a crash and burn trying to sell it to their nephew. And, I could tell in the first conversation with them that, they went to the wrong bank. They had no idea about the process. The buyer, unfortunately, was a first-time buyer, so pretty unsophisticated, so he didn't know what he was doing. And, we like to work with companies that have a value between 1 and 20 million. And if you're selling a company, that's 5, 8, 10, 15 million, you haven't done it before, you really need somebody to help you walk through the process. It can just help avoid an immense amount of landmines that can derail a deal. My partner and I kind of laugh. We want You Don't Know What You Don't Know to be a series of books, and the second book coming out is Steve's book, and it's a story about two people that sold a business, and it's a true story. And one used a broker and the other one didn't. And how that one had such difficulties and the other one kind of walked right through it.
So when you say broker, there got to be all types, right? And so
Yeah.
How do you weed through? I mean, if you look at sort of go to the business listings and you go to business brokers, there's a ton of stuff out there. How do you sort of separate the junk from what might be an investment?
That's a great question, and I really think it mostly revolves around the experience of the broker himself. I like to classify brokers into 3 categories. I always say you have your franchise brokers over here, and if you look at their websites, probably average listing size is 200,000. They're selling Main Street businesses, just really small. And a lot of those sales are business to consumer. So you're selling a business to a first-time buyer, which I would call a consumer.
Right.
And we don't want to go there. That's just a mess. People don't have financial statements. They're not bankable. It's hard to get banking. You get to 1 to 20 million where we like to be. And those take some business acumen to get that done. And you're primarily still doing banking, typical conventional banking. Once you get over 20 million, then you're really starting to run into private equities and, different things like that. So that's the background where I came. My company was $42 million a year in sales. So, I'm really comfortable there. I've done 11, 12 acquisitions. So in a variety of different ways, from owner financing to, 100% bank financing to cash to earnouts and just, a lot of experience, and done it several ways myself personally.
I saw something the other day, and I wonder what your take on it is. It said that and I personally had never seen the SBA work. It never worked for me. And I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that it worked for, but is the SBA a way to go? I mean, I hear that they're doing up to 90% financing for.
Yeah, well, it is very definitely a way to, you look at, there's a chapter in the book I talk about your bankability, and the simple part of any loan, the basic, is you have cash flow and collateral. And the SBA is there to fill that collateral void, that goodwill. If you're going to do an SBA loan, I would highly encourage you to go to a bank that specializes in SBA loans. Otherwise, you're going to get caught in a quagmire of paperwork. It is not the easiest way, but it is a way. And if you get the right person, you can get through it pretty simply, but there's definitely more paperwork involved, and it definitely takes a little bit more time. One of my coaching clients, we're going through him opening up a shop, and he was able to get this acquisition done, simple conventional banking. And, he got it done in a week because he was already established with the bank. They was willing to, he had enough collateral that he didn't need the SBA to fund or, to secure that part, guarantee that part. So, easy breezy, right? It was done in a week. That's the beauty of doing a conventional loan, especially if you're already established with a bank. But in the St. Louis area here, there's a ton of good SBA banks. And it is funny because I talked to other people, for instance, in Kansas City, apparently they don't do a lot of SBA loans. So it does depend a little bit on your area, but yes, it is a very viable way to get things done.
Is you mentioned bankable. What do you mean by
that? That's interesting. So even in evaluations, we trademark the term bankability method. So what I mean by that is it a bankable deal? So if I say a company is worth $5 million, can you go to a bank, put a reasonable down payment down, and have enough cash flow from the company you're buying to get to a debt service coverage ratio that's acceptable to the bank? So I like to get to show where there's a debt service coverage ratio of at least 1.7, 1.6, 1.7. So what does that mean? That means there's $1.70 in income for every dollar's worth of debt. Typically, a minimum debt service coverage ratio for a bank is 1.2, but 1.25. But if you're doing a loan and you're at 1.3, I'm telling you, that is a leveraged loan. And in some instances, I would tell you that the bank is selling you a loan, and quite often the borrower doesn't really know what they're getting themselves into. And 5 years down the road, they're still struggling to make payments.
Yeah.
So, but at 1.7, you'll get any bank to go along with that, and that's a very bankable deal, and that'll cash flow just fine.
You think the banks would do a 1.2, 1.25? I mean, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, and sadly they will, but like I said, that is still
that's dangerous, and that sounds.
It is. It's a leverage zone, and part of that reasoning is, when you're normalizing a financial statement, you're adding back depreciation and amortization, which are non-cash expenses. But you also have to think about your principal payments when you're making a loan. A principal payment is cash coming out of the company that doesn't hit your income statement. So if you're at a 1.2 or I would even go up to 3 or 4 on a debt service coverage ratio, you know, you're going to have a hard time cash flowing that company with that payment.
I mean, yeah, that doesn't leave you any room for capital improvement. It doesn't leave you any room for hiring. It doesn't leave you any room at all.
No, it doesn't. And if you have any hiccups, especially taking over the company new, it's going to be a problem, especially if you don't have any other income source besides the company that you bought.
Yeah, I mean, you lose a client and have to spend 6 months bringing a new client. I mean, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you know, the other big thing, I'm sincere about a bank selling somebody a loan. I am a firm believer, and when I was buying companies, if I could pay for the company in 3 to 5 years, that was kind of my trigger. So that's a return on your investment, you know, a cap rate of say 33% to 20%. Where I see people also get in trouble is on an SBA loan, you can get a 10-year amortization schedule. So if they qualify the loan at say a 1.3 debt service coverage ratio, and it's on a 10-year amortization schedule, that's just wrong. I mean, it's setting people up for failure.
It sounds nice up front, doesn't it? Because of the
does. And the buyer, you know, is anxious to, you know, I don't know, sometimes I think having all this financial acumen as much as a curse as it is anything, because, you know, that's the first thing I go to. And these other people are like, I'm buying the business. I don't care about the financial aspect of it. You know, I want to buy this thing. Oh. But it's like, stop, wait, you know. And unfortunately, I've worked with a lot of clients that is exactly what's happened. They didn't have the company valued, so they overpaid for it, you know, and the bank was willing to finance it at an extended period, and there just wasn't enough cash flow. And then they see a little bit of a dip in sales, whether it's because they just took it over, whether it's because of the economy or whatever, and it puts them in a bind. And that's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And 10 years is a long time.
Yeah, it's a really long time. And I appreciate that. Thank you. That's good stuff. How do you make a company bankable? How do you get it ready?
Getting a bank is probably easy. You know, I mean, being bankable, you just have to have good cash flow, and it depends on what you would be bankable at. You know, if you have $100,000 a year in cash flow, it's going to allow you to borrow X. You know, if you have $1 million a year in cash flow, it's going to allow you to borrow, you know, the size of what you can do, or the size of the bankable deals that you can do is tremendously increased. So, you know, you're looking at buying a car and you got a $500 a month payment, it's only $6,000 a year. If you get $10,000 in income, it's probably going to be a bankable deal. But really, I think what people need to focus on as far as is their company bankable, there's really more that goes to it than just the cash flow. Do you have the proper financial statements? You know, do you have your tax returns done? I shudder when I talk to a company and it's October and you're like, hey, I need your tax return for the prior year. And they're like, oh, I filed an extension. You know, it's almost like they're proud that they don't have it done. No, get your financial statements done. Get your tax returns done. You know, and you know, if you don't need to borrow money, that's fine. But if you want to acquire a company, or you want to, you know, or you need to be a bankable person, get your ducks in a row, get your financial statements done, create yourself a debt schedule. So that's a really important thing for your listeners. If they don't do it, that really helps your bank. Create a debt schedule. So what's a debt schedule? A debt schedule is just list all of your loans down, and you want to say, you know, who did I borrow? What bank did I borrow it from? What's my interest rate? What was the original amount of the loan? What's my monthly payment? When does the loan mature? What collateral is the bank holding to secure this loan? And then, you know, what's my monthly payment? And if you have, you know, so let's just assume you got 8 loans out there. So if you do that, then you know what your total payments are per month. And if you know what your cash flow is, you know, divide it by that, and you know what your debt service coverage ratio is. Then as these loans get going along, if you're going to go and buy another company, take a look at your debt schedule, and does it make sense to combine any of those loans? I mean, I've run into just numerous situations where a guy's got 4 or 5 loans that are just about paid off. You know, the payment's the same. The monthly payment is the same on the first payment as it is to the last payment. And in several scenarios, you can combine 3 or 4 loans, borrow another $500,000, and your monthly payments are actually going to remain the same.
Yeah.
So it's just very smart business. It really is. So, and then
go ahead.
Another thing to think about is, as far as your bankability, like I said earlier, the basis of any loan is collateral and cash flow. So, what's your cash flow, and if you're going to borrow money, what do you have to give the bank that if this thing goes south, they're made whole? Now, go ahead.
No, that leads me to a question about accounting, right? So is it, do you think accrual basis is better or cash
cash counting? Yeah. If I could hold the computer up right now and shake it, I would say, do accrual accounting.
Okay.
Do not do cash accounting. I mean, cash accounting is fine if you're a little bitty Main Street business, but if you're a company of any size, you need to be doing accrual accounting, especially on your P&L. If you want to do, you can make an argument to do cash accounting for your tax returns. That's fine, but your financial statements need to be done on accrual accounting. If you're not doing accrual accounting, so what's the difference, right? Cash accounting, it's not a sale until you collect the money. It's not an expense until you pay the bill. So if you're doing cash accounting, you don't have an accounts receivable and you don't have accounts payable. Well, that's kind of BS because you do have an accounts receivable and accounts payable, but you don't know what it is. So, and especially if you're going to buy a business and they're doing cash accounting, man, I talk about it in the book. There's a whole lot of ways to monkey with them financial statements if you're doing cash accounting. If you want to improve your bottom line, fine. You show all the income, you just don't pay any of your bills. They're still out there. But
right.
The income statement looks a lot better, right?
Yeah.
So, and then if you're an ongoing business, what is your accounts receivable days? What's your payable days? What's your inventory days? We coach people on learning, if I could, even if you're the most non-financial person in the world, I can teach you about 8 financial ratios that I guarantee you, we'll create a dashboard for you. And if what your current ratio is, AR days, payable days, inventory days, daily sales, cash flow margin, gross profit margin, you're going to have a very good idea what's going on with that company. And you can't do it if you're doing cash accounting.
I'm amazed in my coaching because I do coach a lot of small and medium enterprises and I've run several, and I'm just, I'm sort of shocked pretty regularly that you don't pay for that kind of help, right? I'm not an accounting person by any means, but you got to have an accountant.
Yeah, you can't touch the nerve. Can you tell the difference between cash and accrual accounting? But the other thing I can tell you is what I see a lot is I work a lot with a independent truck repair group. So they're a bunch of diesel repair facilities. And you would think, well, that's a really small business. Not really. They can be some pretty good sized companies. Yeah. So there's associations that will teach them how to run their shop just the most efficient way possible, and what numbers you need to be looking at there. We worked with a dental management company. They teach you how to run your dental office the most efficient way. But what we find, in my opinion, is there's nobody really out there teaching them how to run their business. What makes them bankable? What are they saving?
The systems that you have to put in place, all that.
Yeah. I've worked with people that are in their 50s and they want to retire in 5 years, and it's like, yeah, well, you ain't even close. So I'm really all about helping, whether I'm being the broker or a coach or whatever, it's all about building your team. Who's on your team? Who's your CPA? Who's your attorney? Who's your financial advisor? And you just gotta have those people in place.
You're going to hit me because you're going to throw something at me, but you can't hit me all the way in Brazil. But the first business we bought it. You were talking earlier about making kind of an emotional decision versus using your head. And we bought it completely on emotion, paid too much. But the guy took us to the bank and showed us his safety deposit box, and it was full of cash. He said, "See, my business makes money." And so I kind of feel like, we just see that kind of thing all the time where it's just, it's a mess. And
Yeah, I call that, when people, I get it, nobody wants to pay taxes. And if you can do that, great. You didn't hear that from me, but if you want to sell your business, you have to stop, and I tell people when I run into a situation like that, I call it, you can't sell your business on the wink, get it? If you're really making this much money.
or our accountant said, if you buy that, I'm disowning you.
Yeah. It's funny.
He was funny.
Yeah, so another important point to make is that, and I tell people all the time when I'm doing valuations, is, if I'm valuing your company, I'm doing a financial valuation. I'm valuing the cash flow of that company. In one of the presentations I give, and I run them, the audience through, a simple way to value a company on making a financial valuation. But then let's stop and think, okay, my prior life, I owned an oil company. And if I was buying another oil company, what expenses am I going to eliminate from that company? And, what's the difference between the financial value of the company and the strategic value of the company? And that's really a big thing. And again, not that I don't keep plugging the book here, but I do talk about it in the book. And me and my accountant often clashed because he always preached to me, Terry, you buy a business, you pay for a business for the cash flow that it's generating, not the cash flow that it's going to generate under you. And I'll agree with that to a certain extent. I like to tell the story of, I had 5 bulk plants. These are petroleum storage facilities. And 2 of them were 30 miles apart. And there was a little company in the middle, right between them. And this is an area that I had very high customer concentration, and that guy wanted to sell. In my opinion, the company was overpriced by, let's just say, $150,000. But was I willing to pay him for an extra 150? Dang tootin', because he's sitting right in the middle of my property and he has a bulk storage plant. So if my competitor buys it, now it's like a cancer cell right in the middle of an area. So, I paid him the extra money. I tore the facility down. Nobody's going to build a new one. And I kept control of the area, so there's times that it makes a lot of sense.
Do you believe in that sort of that acquisition entrepreneurship?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's 100% how I grew my company, because there's so many times, I'm selling diesel fuel, and lubricants. It's a fungible product. That means it's the same. No matter, whatever the marketing may say the difference is, it all comes out of the pipeline. So I could go talk to a farmer or an excavator till I'm blue in the face, but he's got a supplier he's been using for 15 years. He knows the guy personally. We're about the same price. So there's really no reason to switch. But if I go buy the company, just because we did it so many times, we kept 95% of the customers. And, another thing to think about is you may know a lot of the customers that your competitor has, but you don't know all of them. And by doing an acquisition, it got us into a lot of places that we'd never ever get into. An example I like to use is ConocoPhillips refinery in Wood River, Illinois. One, who would have thought that a refinery buys fuel, right? They make the stuff. And 2, I never would have guessed they used the amount of fuel they did. And if I wanted to call on that customer, I can't get in the gate because I don't have a pass to get through past the security guard. And the person I really needed to talk to was in Houston, Texas, So, but by doing an acquisition, we got that account with an open PO. It's beautiful, and
where do you go for help? If you want to grow through acquisition, what's the best, how do you go about that? Where do you find help for that?
You mean as far as finding a company to buy, or?
Well, the sort of legal help and the help, to do the acquisition, to leverage what you have, because in order to do that, you've got to leverage your business.
Sure. It goes right back to what we talked about earlier. Build your team. I worked with 2 banks. I sat down with my banker at the beginning of every year, told him what acquisitions I was looking at, asked him, gave him timely financial statements. I even gave my financial statements to a 3rd bank that I wasn't doing business with, just to kind of keep them in the loop of what was going on with my company. Because, I did have a situation in my career path owning the company where the bank got a different credit analyst And this guy was squirrelier than heck and didn't understand my business. And I left because like, that dude's my credit analyst. He don't get what I'm doing. I'm going to a bank that understands it. So I always kept the bank kind of waiting in the wings. But then who's your attorney? Do you have an attorney that's a good transactional attorney who can get you through an M&A transaction without trying to take over the process or screw it up? You don't know what you don't know. A partner and I have joked about, the byline on mine is everything you need to know to buy or sell a business. We've joked that we want to write another one. You don't know what you don't know, 101 ways to screw up the purchase of a company. And an attorney can either be your biggest friend or your biggest foe in getting through the process. And we can do a whole other podcast on that.
Amen to that. What's the best, how do you avoid those disasters in an acquisition? It goes back to your team, I guess, right?
Yeah, it goes back to your team and, experience. And that, if you've never done it, that's all the reason to have a broker who's qualified at it. And, there's all those awkward questions, like, hey, the buyer wants to see my accounts receivable list. I'm not showing him that. It's got all my customers on there. He's just going to run from the deal and he'll know who all my customers are. Well, why does he want to see your accounts receivable list? He's looking for customer concentration. So it's real simple. You just cover up the names and you show him, because that is a deal. And I got burnt on it once, we talk about caught up in the emotion of buying the company. In this particular situation, there's kind of two sides to it. One, there was customer concentration. He had one account. I sold diesel fuel and I also sold lubricants, but I tell you, I was a fuel company that sold lubes. This was a lubricants company that also sold fuel. Well, right. I needed his facility. So even though the customer it was a mine and it did close 2 years after I bought this dang place, I needed his facilities. And really what I paid for the company, I couldn't build those facilities. Another great reason for a strategic acquisition. But customer concentration is a real issue. And it could, the other thing about valuing a company, we're valuing the cash flow. There's non-financial things that can affect the value of your company and even make it completely unsellable. I like to talk about a customer I had in the fuel business. He delivers all the milk for a dairy. Gallon jugs, cottage cheese, all that stuff. He runs about 50 trucks. So pretty big business, he's going through 10,000 gallons plus of fuel a week, which is, a great customer for me. But guess how many customers he has? Zero. He's got one customer, the dairy. So how are you going to sell that business? With the value builder system, which is developed by John Warillo out of Canada, they call that the Switzerland structure. Switzerland's a very independent country. So how independent is your company on any one customer, any one employee, or any one supplier? You could have, some type of supplier contract, and if it's not transferable, that could be an issue with selling your company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you had to leave people with a couple of thoughts about the book and key takeaways, what are
they? I think it's a very personable book. It's a quick read. I wouldn't consider myself an author, so writing the book was a painful process. But the aha moment in writing the book was at the end of each chapter, there's questions. And it's the last thing I did in writing the book. And when I was writing these questions, that's like, if you can answer these questions, you'll have learned something. So I just flipped to the end of the chapter, what kind of attorney should you have? Well, don't go into an acquisition using your estate planning attorney. Get it, like we said, get an attorney that's got M&A experience. If I trademarked a brand of lubricants, if you're gonna trademark something, get an attorney that does trademarks.
Right.
Just bring the right tools to the table. So the key takeaway in the book, I'd say, is the beginning I talk about acquisitions and why it may make sense to buy an existing company versus starting something from scratch. Then we kind of take you through the whole process. Then What's a simple way to value a company? What's the steps of buying a company? The middle of the book, I like to say, is about building your team. So, I mean, there's a chapter on bankers, attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors, and we talk about your bankability. There's a chapter that talks about building value in the company, you know, those non-financial things that affect the value of the company. Right. Then get into the selling process and confidentiality and you know, and then the last chapter of the book I call "Don't Be Like a Dog That Caught the Car." So in other words, know what the heck you're going to do with your life once you sell your company. And these are all things that I've lived personally. I try and keep the book humorous. And I think I'm sincere in talking about things that I did right and things I should have done differently. I always tell people I have no regrets from selling my company, but you know, you don't know what you don't know. And if I'd have known then what I know now, wow, I think it could have been dangerous.
Well, I would say it was very easy to read, and it really distills down the process for buying and selling, and it made it a real easy, understandable process, particularly for most people who are not expert in this. Right? They just love what they do, and they you know, and that's their passion, and all of this other stuff seems sort of complicated and overwhelming. And
yeah, and you know what's interesting is, you know, I see a lot of different businesses, and I valued a manufacturing company that involved a lot of metal. And I mean, I valued a company at like $25 million or something. So I mean, it's a good sized company, been around for 100 years. And I explained the valuation to the owner, and his son, family, you know, owns the business. And everybody else walked out of the boardroom, and the owner comes up to me, puts his hand on my back. He goes, "Terry, I don't know nothing about this crap. I know how to buy steel." So, you know, it's just, so no matter what size company you got, I mean, I tell people all the time, don't feel bad that you don't know this. You know, I don't ask me to take your gallbladder out or put a, you know, it's, you specialize in what you do. And if you don't know how to do it, find somebody that's good at it.
Well, how do you pick a broker? Like,
you know, honestly, I would say interview them. Look at it, you know, today's world with LinkedIn and websites, all that stuff. You know, look at their background. Or, you know, are they that franchise broker? Are they doing deals in the space that you're in? It's amazing. There's brokers that strictly sell dental practices. There's brokers that strictly sell quick lubes. You know, so they're going to have a lot more contacts. We don't really, with Innovative Business Advisors, we don't really have a niche that we pick. And I don't know, I would tell you that we would try to develop that, but, you know, but we do work with a lot of companies in that value range of 1 to 20 million. And, you know, we know the resources, and while marketing is always a challenge for me, I'd tell you that is a weak point for me personally, but you know, that's the marketing piece of attracting sellers, but the marketing piece of attracting buyers, we're very good at. And I mean, once we have a company to sell and we can search that NAICS code, you know, in the database that we got of people, we're pretty good at finding the buyers. Okay. So
how do they find, how do people get in touch with you? And how do they get the book? And then how do they get in touch with you? I'll actually put the link in the LinkedIn feed, but.
Yeah, the book's available on Amazon and what's the other version? You can Kindle. So you can go to Amazon. You can download the Kindle version for free. We're obviously website, www.innovativeba.com. You'll find us on LinkedIn. My phone number is 618-530-8922. Happy to talk to anybody.
All right, Terry. Hey, thank you for joining us today. It was really great to have you. Now, this has been the Power Lunch Live on LinkedIn. Check out our schedule on the website for upcoming guests. We've got a special show tomorrow. I've got Sue Bingham and Bob Dewson. They're gonna talk about their new book, 8 Elements. And I gotta pull it up. 8 Elements of a Workplace Where People Love to Come to Work. That's Friday afternoon tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Special edition of the Power Lunch. But anyway, go to the website. It's powerlunch.live, powerlunch.live. You can see our schedule. Got a lineup of great guests this month. I would love to bring the program to your conference or event. So touch base via LinkedIn, a direct message, or through the website, and let's see if we can make that happen. Until then, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Rhett.